With a legacy of timeless hits and a voice that shaped the soundtrack of an era, Björn Ulvaeus from the iconic band ABBA needs little introduction. As one-fourth of the Swedish supergroup, his contributions to music have transcended borders and generations. In my interview, we discussed not only the process of writing and recording with ABBA, but also his recent experiences with AI technologies. Here's my interview. Björn, welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you about ABBA, but I want to talk to you about AI.
Okay, we start there.
What are your thoughts on where we are now and where things are going with AI?
Well, I had an AI model demonstrated to me a couple of weeks ago by one of the really big tech companies.
Okay.
I was blown away about the potential. What they showed me was mind-boggling.
Okay.
And what you've heard so far is nothing against what's coming.
Okay.
And
I'm getting nervous.
Yes. Well, you know, you have to be defensive and offensive at the same time as a creator, because it's a fantastic tool. It will be the most fantastic co-writer you will ever have. But on the other hand, these AI models will be training on music that people have written.
Right.
I don't know if it's too late, but certainly we have to fight for the writers of that music so that they can get remunerated in some form or other. I don't know if they'll be able to opt out if they don't want to be trained on. But I suspect that it's going to be very difficult to prove whether a model is trained on ABBA music or not. Because from what I heard coming out from that demonstration was that the melody, if you ask it to write an ABBA-like melody, you would never be able to recognize that. You'll never be able to hear that it comes from Benny and me if it's sung by someone else.
Right.
Which in this case it was. And then it's so it'll be so difficult to trace and to track. Hopefully, these big companies will be good guys, and I think some of them want to be on the side of the creators,
okay,
rather than against.
Right now, the things that are popping up, at least on YouTube, things I've talked about, there's people taking young Paul McCartney, training his voice using Beatles multi-tracks. Voices, yeah.
That's
this is one part of it, right? And then taking a song that Paul McCartney, this is a thing that I talked about in the video, took a song that Paul did when he was 71, but put young Paul McCartney's voice on it.
Yeah.
Okay. The people that are doing the demonstration for you, are they saying, did you talk about how do people get credited?
As we did.
Okay, and what
did
they say?
What they wanted to talk about.
Okay.
This is what's happening right now. We have to find a way, but nobody's claiming yet that we know exactly where to go. Because as I said, it's very, very, very difficult to say what it has been trained on, unless what you described, which is much easier, because that is a voice that you recognize.
Right.
The style of recording, the style of writing melodies, not necessarily easy to detect.
Right.
But the prompt, the instruction to the AI model, that's where you could go. And if there's someone in the prompt, like ABBA-like, but with a hint of Queen, sung by Frank Sinatra. Right. But then you can at least, identify who it's been trained on. But how do you then distribute whatever payment comes out of that? This is a huge problem for the music industry, and one that is being talked about, as we speak around the globe.
I have a theory you're going to have on platforms like Spotify, ABBA and ABBA AI, the Beatles AI, Elton John and Elton John AI eventually. And people, I think, will accept those things. Do you think that the artists will accept themselves that there's an AI version of their music?
I don't know, because I haven't been exposed to it. It might be good. It might be that these AI songs point back to the original and may make the original stream better, perhaps. Right. We don't know that. As I said, at the same time, it's a fantastic tool.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say I want to write something for a musical, and it needs to be a tango.
Mm-hmm.
And I ask the AI model to give me a suggestion based on the 10 best tangos ever written. And it comes up with ideas. And I will say, oh, that's not bad. I'll keep that.
Right.
But then I'll tweak it and I'll do something myself, and I might ask for a lyric idea, you know. I will use it as a tool, like a synth or like anything you use in songwriting. So that's exciting to me as a creator.
I've heard from friends that are in Nashville that in all these writing sessions that the Nashville writers are doing, that they use ChatGPT now.
Yeah, you do already, yeah.
Yeah. Is there something that needs to be embedded in these things that will enable you to know how these models are trained?
As far as I know, after the event, it's very hard to trace.
Okay.
So it needs to be transparent from the beginning, or the prompt, the instruction, what that contains. Otherwise, I only see like a blanket license for a label and a publisher, and the CMO gives a DSP a blanket license, or an AI model a blanket license to use its catalog, and then pays a fee for that, which is then distributed in some way to the creators. It's very complicated, but...
And who figures this out? Because these are laws...
this is being figured out right now as we speak.
Yeah.
And nobody's agreed to where it will end yet. We're having this discussion while so many other discussions are going on.
Could you ever have imagined a world like this when you were making records back in 1975, 1976?
No, I mean, that was even before the first synth, the first mini moog.
Yeah.
When we did Mamma Mia,
Yeah.
the song, that the synths hadn't come onto the stage yet. The desk wasn't computerized. We had 16 or 8, I can't remember now. But there were 3 of us sitting in front of the desk like this, a military-like exercise.
Would you rehearsing?
I had the responsibility for the right side, and Benny the middle, and our sound engineer the left. And we did that over and over again until everything was, we thought perfect.
Would you mix sections and then splice the...
No, we would mix the whole thing.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So there was an echo up that place and then back, stuff
Okay,
like
how
that.
many passes would it take to get a mix sometimes? What would be a lot? Would you get it sometimes 10 times, sometimes 1 time?
If we really were convinced that now it's finished, it's time to mix.
Yeah.
Maybe 10 times, sometimes more. So things were so much easier in a way.
Yeah.
We were, sometimes very lucky to end up with a mix like Mamma Mia, which is so incredibly good even today.
Yes.
There's nothing there that I think, oh, that bass should have been slightly louder. There's nothing, which is not the case for some songs that I won't mention.
Doesn't it get to a point, though, where there's things about it where you're like, I can't remember what I used to hate about the mix or whatever, right? There must be some things like that.
I remember that I would think, oh, that hi-hat is slightly bit too loud. But then the record came out and you forgot.
Right.
So it wasn't that important after all.
And then let's say you have ideas and you maybe abandoned something, but this is a good verse, or this may be a good bridge or something.
Yeah.
Were you the guy that would say, hey, I remember this thing that we did 3 weeks ago, and there's a bridge here that I think would fit with this other song?
We both did that.
Okay. You and Benny both would do that.
Yeah, yes. We never put anything on tape.
Okay.
And we never wrote anything down.
Okay. How did you remember things?
It was only the stuff that really stuck, that we've ever used. There's several bridges and several verses, like around in our HI model, human intelligence model.
Right.
Something would come up and one of us would, click and say, hey, you know, remember that one? And then sometimes beautifully it would just integrate with the other bit.
Would you refer to sections? Like how would you call verse B part, pre-chorus? Would you use terms like that to refer to your songs?
It would use terms like intro, instrumental, verse, bridge, chorus. Every ingredient, everything had to be the best it could be. So there was no having a great chorus, so it doesn't matter about the verse. Let's take that verse because the chorus is so good. It was never like that. It was always a matter of, you know, never finishing anything unless every part was there. And of course, when we went into the studio, sometimes every part wasn't there, but almost all of it. Some stuff would come up in the studio, of course. But the song proper, we would have written before we went into the studio.
When you wrote them, you'd be playing guitar or having piano. And
Yeah.
it's something, the songs would be written around something,
Yeah.
right? And then you guys would rehearse them, and you kind of know what the structure is, and then you go in and you start tracking the song.
I wouldn't say that we knew always what the character of the song was. We just had the song and the chords.
Yeah.
And then sometimes a song would, you know, change and become something else than we had ever anticipated.
Like Dancing Queen, for
Yeah,
example,
yeah.
starts kind of in the middle of the chorus, right? This is such an
Yeah, that was
unusual
an edit.
arranging. That was an edit, okay?
Yeah, that was an edit.
Okay.
We had, it was too long, and I don't know who came up with the idea when we could start there instead, and that was great.
It's brilliant.
Yeah, it kind of illustrates how the human mind works a bit like AI as well. You know, that we gather all this information in the form of songs when we grow up, and we never stop, I think, and we use it as inspiration, as an impulse to do something. I can say that Dancing Queen was inspired by a big hit in the US called Rock You Baby. Mm-hmm. So when you hear Dancing Queen, it has nothing to do with Rock You Baby.
Right.
But the groove, that slow kind of disco groove,
Right.
was something that, that's interesting. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's how pop music evolves.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you take a track like that, when you would start recording a track, so you have the song structure and everything, and you start layering things, because your records are so beautifully produced. How long would it take for you to decide that you had the right groove for the song, the right tempo? Would you try it a bunch of times?
Yeah, but we had musicians in the studio.
Yeah.
We had another guitar player and a bass and drums.
Yep.
The five of us would sit in the studio. I would write a demo lyric. Mm-hmm. And Benny and I would play the song, and gradually the guys would, come in, and we'd be doing that until we felt, well, this might be something.
Okay.
We would stop, say to the bass player, "Oh, remember that? That's great." And they were so disciplined, so that then he'd stick to that.
Okay.
for that part of the song.
Right.
And that's how we would work, and eventually I would get out and get up here into the studio, and it would continue until we had a basic backing track.
And would that typically
piano,
be one day or so? And,
one
and
day.
what would be the backing track? Would it be piano, bass, drums, and one guitar part, something like that?
One guitar, bass, drums, and a piano or a synth of some kind later. We would have that basic backing track, and then Benny would do overdubs once the synths came into our world. I mean, there was, so many possibilities. And once we felt this is what this song is about. That's when I would write the lyric. Not until then. because I had done, and I had regretted it because it was always wrong. Because the song would change its atmosphere, its genre sometimes, and altogether. So
Because of the actual sound of the track, right?
Yeah,
It would have
yeah.
a certain
Yes.
vibe to it that
Yeah.
would suggest a mood for the lyric.
Yeah, not only a mood, it would conjure up like images sometimes in me when I would play it back, again and again, because I trusted in the fact that it would tell me what it's about, either in the form of a line, a hook, or in the form of something happening, like in Knowing Me, Knowing You. I could clearly see a man, in this case, walking from room to room with boxes all packed up, empty rooms, and what was going through his mind at that moment, like almost cinematic. Writing a lyric is something in between a poem and a melody,
Right.
because a pop lyric should have, the percussive qualities that the melody and the track demands.
Explain that a
Sound
little
right.
more.
So, for instance, Take a Chance on Me
Yeah.
comes from wow, because it sounded like that.
So when you're sitting there with your notepad or whatever, writing your lyrics, you're
Yeah.
thinking about these things.
Only afterwards, only when I played the track back with overdubs on it.
Would you sit typically in the studio and do that, or would you take home?
I would sit at home.
What would be a short time to write a lyric versus a long time?
Some songs I wrote several. I think Chiquitita, we tried two other lyrics because the ladies would come into the studio and sing and it wouldn't sound right.
Okay.
And then it was a matter of going back to the drawing board.
Would it not sound right because just hearing them sing it and you're like, it doesn't work?
Yeah, intuitively, not knowing exactly why, but
Right.
no, this isn't right. It doesn't feel right. And that's where I think an AI cannot,
Right.
compete.
This AI, this company that played you this new AI, what do we call this?
They refer to AI models.
Models.
Yeah, and there will be many such models out there. I think they're quite expensive to build.
Okay.
The really good ones, so there might not be so many to start with.
What is in it for the companies like Spotify and Apple Music? Do the labels say, we're not going to let you use any of our music. We're going to create our own streaming platforms where we put all of our own artists out and we're going to use our own AI. This seems like this is a whole nother problem.
Yes, it is. And one huge problem is the number of songs being uploaded. And you can imagine with AI as well. The DSPs have to put some kind of filter, or the aggregators through which the songs flow, and the labels.
Right.
They have to put some filters in there. We can't have AI songs, millions of them, dilute
That's right.
the royalties for the real artists and the real songwriters. I haven't spoken to any representatives of DSPs yet about that, but I imagine they're thinking about it because, for one thing, the storage costs
Right.
so much money.
Yes.
And the energy that's being wasted on all this, forgive me, but bullshit being uploaded.
Yeah.
And the other problem is, how will we remunerate the creators of the music that it's trained on?
When you have so much music out there, people now rely on algorithms to suggest things.
Yeah.
What keeps a Spotify from pushing their own AI artists over actual real artists?
The music industry right now are talking about artist-centric, user-centric subscription models.
Okay.
That could be one solution, that you actually only pay the artist who you're playing.
Mm-hmm.
So then the unplayed AI is not being paid, because no one who subscribes wants to listen to it.
Right.
As easy as that.
Right.
I've been talking about user-centric for a long time, and I think it's one thing that has to be really seriously considered now with AI coming in.
Who makes these decisions, though, ultimately?
Ultimately, the big bosses in the music industry. And there I talk about the labels, the publishers, the DSPs, all of them.
Are they nervous or are they excited about this, about this technology?
Both.
Okay.
What I hear, they're both nervous and excited. And it depends on who you talk to, of course. Some people only see the negative side.
Well, I personally believe that the average listener out there will accept AI music if it's good. They don't care if it's not created by humans.
No. I agree with you. From what I've heard so far, I could potentially think that I'm listening to either a radio station or I happen to stream something which I think, wonderful, this is great. And it could be AI.
Right.
That's going to happen. I think great music is created from the human experience, deep emotions, and all that stuff AI can't handle.
Right.
AI can just, guess what comes next. The fan bases will be much more important, and people will want to feel closeness to the artist that they love. I mean, I'm an avatar myself, but I doubt that avatars, that people will be okay with avatars.
I want to ask you about this. When you created your avatars,
Yeah.
okay, the actual, what do you call it, motion capture or something, when they put the sensors on and they put them all over your body, right? And you were...
Yeah, we were dressed in some kind of black leotards.
Okay.
With little bulbs on them.
Okay.
And helmets and dots in our faces. And to make it easier for the cameras and the computers to register how we moved around.
Okay, and you were actually singing to you were basically playing and lip syncing to your own tracks, right?
We were doing exactly the same thing we did in front of TV cameras in the 70s. Exactly the same thing, only this time for 70-year-olds, looking ridiculous.
Could you ever have imagined that?
No, of course not. I thought it was the end of it in the 80s. They might play the odd song, but otherwise ABBA would be forgotten.
ABBA has so many young fans. My kids, my kids are 16, 14, and 10. They know your music. Why has your music lasted for so long?
Yeah, I really honestly don't know. And I'm okay with that.
Right.
But as soon as people start trying to explain...
Feels good though, doesn't it?
It feels really good.
Yeah.
Yes. Every day I'm reminded of it. Someone comes up to me and you can see in their face, now I'm going to tell him something that he hasn't heard before. Thank you for the music. But it's so sweet. But you don't need to know exactly why. You just have to accept it. I listen to some of the songs back to back with something new. Mm-hmm. It still sounds fresh. It doesn't sound... Some of them sound dated, yes, but a lot of them don't.
When you guys would track your vocals, how would you delineate who was going to sing what? Was there an ABBA sound that you would always go for with the vocals?
Well, you just had to hear the two ladies, and that was the ABBA sound. There's some unique quality when they sing together.
They blend.
They blend, and especially when Frida, she's a mezzo, and she strives to get up there with Agneta is a soprano.
Yeah.
There's a kind of metal in the sound that is distinct, and you can hear it miles away.
Do you think it's because she's in her upper part of her range and there's a certain harmonic thing that happens between the two?
Something happens between the two. And as far as who sings what, it was a matter of, this album, oh, Agneta already has 3, it's my turn.
So you would literally do stuff like that,
It was more like that. Which I think is fair.
Kind of like you would expect.
Yeah.
Did they ever say, why didn't you give me that song?
Not that I can remember.
Interesting.
It might have been, that we might have played 3 or 4 songs to them, and one of them would have said, oh, that's mine.
Bjorn, I want to come back to something about the AI-trained voice that has been appearing on YouTube is one of the places, and TikTok. There was AI Drake song, and who owns that Drake voice?
That's a very interesting question. One that we've been thinking about, being avatars and all of that.
Yeah.
Name and likeness is an important thing.
Yeah.
Can you copyright yourself or trademark yourself? I think you must be able to. The label owns the sound recording, but I own my voice.
Right.
And where is the distinction? If someone imitates Elvis,
Right.
you can't take that down.
No.
If an AI trains on your voice, it's an imitation, isn't it?
It is.
So legally, how will you be able to take down John Lennon singing something else? It's going to be very problematic.
Some people would say, well, this is obviously fair use. This is an original creation.
Yeah. So far, ABBA has many tribute bands.
Right.
And I see that as a tribute. I see that as fantastic that people even want to imitate.
Have you been out to see an actual ABBA tribute?
No, I haven't. No, that's
That's
no,
a little. That's a bridge too far.
That's a bridge too far. But that's an homage to an artist. So if people want to hear you sing O Sole Mio, maybe that's a tribute as well to your voice. We have to be exposed to it, I think, before we can say anything.
Right.
And we ain't seen nothing yet.
Right. It is amazing, though, the speed at which all these things developed in the last 6 months, really.
Yes. I was guest editor on Radio 4 in between Christmas and in the UK. In between Christmas and New Year's Eve, and I spoke to a Google guy high up in the hierarchy, and he said to me then, AI is going to explode this year. And it did.
It did.
It really did.
So tell me about your app that you've been working on.
I've been interested in artists and songwriters' rights for a long time.
You're the president of CSAC.
Of CSAC, which is, of course, the umbrella organization for all CMOs, all PRSs, BMIs, ASCAPs around the world.
Yep.
And I'm also the proud co-founder of a platform called Session. And with the core idea to capture the relevant metadata, the relevant identifiers for songwriters during the creative process, because that is the secret to get faster and more accurate payments.
Talk about how songwriters, talk about ways that writers and musicians miss out on money that they're deserved.
A recording is uploaded to Spotify, but the metadata about the songwriters isn't on it.
Right.
The label hasn't included that.
Right.
And that means that Spotify doesn't know who to pay the money to. And it goes into a black box.
And that black box has a lot of money in it.
Yeah. I don't know what it's like today, but in the old days, it used to be that the black box within certain periods was distributed to publishers and CMOs and labels according to market share. And what happened to it after that, I don't know.
Session then includes the metadata.
Yeah.
Who plays on the tracks?
Well, it's about the writing of the song.
Okay, writing of the song.
Because so many songs are co-written today by 10, 15 people. And they need to be included with their identifiers, numbers, for neighboring rights and for the publishing rights.
So everyone would have a unique...
And the work has a certain code, ISWC, and the writers have their numbers, unique numbers.
Which would be like a social security number or what? Something
Yes,
like
exactly.
That would always be their number.
Yeah, so that follows the song into the recording, and everything is there. And once it's uploaded to Spotify, everyone knows where to pay the money.
And as far as the songwriter splits are concerned, all that is detailed in this, correct?
Yeah, yeah.
This prevents things like songs that have the same name.
Yeah, because that's what the CMOs have done in the past. They are comparing texts.
Right.
And it's so old-fashioned.
It is
and
so
they still
old-fashioned.
do. If the right code is there from the word go, doesn't matter what the song is called.
What do you do about music that's already in existence that doesn't have the metadata? Should everything be retrofitted with metadata?
Yes, it has to be manually, that song, well, it must be them, and that must be it. And then they're manually matched.
One of the things that always frustrates me, I use both Apple Music and Spotify. The fact that there is such little data on the things, many times the songwriters are missing. There's nothing about who the musicians are. There's nothing about the producer in there, typically. No. That idea of knowing who are contributing to these things is such an important part.
It is important, and it's so unnecessary that it isn't there.
Right.
Because if you do it if you register, you capture it through a tool, a platform like Session, rich metadata would follow the work into the studio and onwards, and everybody would be on it who is on that track. And not only that, they might have taken little videos in the studio that could be included, anything.
Wow.
And that's what we want, rich metadata. When we listen to the music, clickable, rich metadata. That's what we want.
Why are you still interested in this? Do you feel like it's a responsibility to be there for the songwriters?
It's part curiosity and wanting to know what's going on and following what's going on. But it's certainly also to help if I can, but it's also exciting and interesting.
Yeah.
And to have a reason to, deep dive into this thing with AI now is incredibly exciting.
When are there other artists that are creating avatars of themselves that you know of, or that maybe you wouldn't talk about, but that have talked to you about this? There must be, of course.
There have been many artists going to Abba Voyage in London. And I would imagine that a lot of my peers would be thinking about this right now. Mick and Keith and what have you out there. But I have not heard of anyone actually really attempting to do it yet.
It took years to do this, right?
Yeah, and it's also, there are so many ingredients. It's not just putting lifelike avatars on a stage. There needs to be a story, there needs to be depth, there needs to be a fan base, and the music catalog needs to be relevant.
Yeah.
So many things need to be, in place to do it. I've discussed this with our creative team. Who is next? Who could be next? And also the fact that all four of us were alive and condone it, authorized it.
Yes.
Gives it cred in a way that's important. It's not speculation in someone who's dead.
Yeah. Artists that are not living, obviously. I read that Paul McCartney was putting together a Beatles song from a John Lennon demo or something like that, and they're going to use an AI-trained John Lennon.
But what I understand from that is that there is a demo
of John Lennon singing.
Yeah, singing that song.
Yes.
And it's just that the sound quality is bad.
Yeah.
But with the help of AI, you can extract that voice from the bad surrounding and isolate it and enhance it. But it is John Lennon.
To me, that could be a good use of this for artists that are not with us anymore.
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of positives here. I think a lot of people immediately go for the negative, but I've always been well, let's wait and see what happens with it. If you hear one of your songs playing somewhere, you're walking down the street, you hear it, will you listen? Do you think about it? Or do you just go on?
I'm still kind of humbled by it, the fact that it's happening. And you know, I've been traveling a bit lately, Singapore, Seoul, Tokyo, and various places, and it's the same everywhere, which is very, very humbling. How I ask myself every time, how did this happen? But when I hear it on, sometimes in my car, when maybe I listen to a radio station and they play something, I listen.
Are you transported though when you listen? Are you transported back to the time, or do you just kind of take the whole thing in? Do you remember being there creating these things?
No, sadly I don't.
Okay.
I would say that the 70s for us was such a creative explosion that I have very few memories with, you know, individual songs. Because we would write 3, 4, we would go into the studio, we would record them and mix them, and then we'd be on to the next ones, and they would be released, and we would get the charts reports, but we would be on to the next one.
When you're tracking the vocals in the studio, if you've just written a song, do you read lyrics? Would the girls be reading lyrics off lyric sheets?
They'd come in the morning, and I'd give them copies of, and we'd sing it together, like in this situation here.
Yeah.
Exactly this.
Yeah.
That's how we'd start the day. And this is exactly how we started 40 years later, when you got back together. Unexpectedly got back together and recorded a new album. But that was so familiar and so strange, because we were, you know.
Did it feel just like it did? Was it just so familiar?
Yeah, after a few seconds.
Right.
It was weird but familiar. I gave them the lyrics, and and we would go through, and they would make, you know, notes, and
that's amazing.
and then they'd walk out into the studio and stand in front of the mics and exactly the same.
Björn, thank you so much for taking the time to sit here with me.
It's really been a pleasure.
Such an honor to meet you in person. Wow, can't even believe it.
Thank you.
That's all for now. Remember, my channel is self-funded with no outside advertisers. So if you want to see more content like this, think about becoming a member of the Beato Club and hit the subscribe button now. Thanks so much for watching.